Ukraine triggered fresh alarm across Europe after President Zelensky warned that Russia could be preparing a wider military escalation from Belarus. Zelensky made an explosive claim that Moscow may be considering plans targeting either northern Ukraine or even a NATO member state. Fears of a broader confrontation intensified after Kyiv suggested Russia's next move could directly test NATO's eastern flank. The warning from Ukrainian intelligence came as the United States abruptly cancelled plans for the deployment of 4,000 troops to Poland. Concerns are growing inside NATO after reports linked Russia's military preparations and Sarmat missile capabilities to possible future escalation. Amid intensifying attacks in the Russia-Ukraine war, President Volodymyr Zelensky made a major claim about Moscow's next possible military move. Zelensky alleged that Russia is trying to pull Belarus deeper into the Ukraine conflict, according to Reuters. The Ukrainian leader also claimed Moscow is weighing plans to attack northern Ukraine or even a NATO country from Belarusian territory. Volodymyr Zelensky said, and I quote, "We continue to document Russia's attempts to draw Belarus deeper into the war against Ukraine." Ukraine knew of additional contacts between Russia and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko to persuade him to join new Russian aggressive operations. Russia is considering plans for operations to the south and north of Belarusian territory, either against the Chernihiv-Kyiv direction in Ukraine or against one of the NATO countries directly from the territory of Belarus. Unquote. Zelensky said Kyiv is closely monitoring what he described as Moscow's attempts to drag Belarus deeper into the war. According to Zelensky, intelligence reports point to fresh contacts between Russia and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. The Ukrainian leader alleged that Moscow is trying to persuade Minsk to join new aggressive military operations. Belarus borders NATO members Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia, raising fresh concerns over regional security. Neither Moscow nor Minsk immediately responded to Zelensky's claims about possible military plans. Belarus had earlier allowed Russian forces to use its territory during the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Minsk has also agreed to host Russian tactical nuclear weapons and Oreshnik missile systems on its soil. Zelensky said Ukraine has already instructed its defense forces to strengthen northern security measures. Kyiv is now preparing response plans for the Chernihiv and Kyiv regions in case of any future attack. The warning comes amid reports that the United States abruptly cancelled a planned troop deployment to Europe following frustrations within NATO. Reports say Washington abruptly cancelled the deployment of 4,000 troops from an armored brigade to Poland, upending plans that were seen as central to NATO's eastern defense. This decision came right after Trump had already moved to remove 5,000 US troops from Germany, signaling a broader and more dramatic pullback from the continent. According to the Wall Street Journal, it was the Army Times that first reported the cancelled deployment, revealing the shift before officials had fully explained it. Some equipment and soldiers from the 1st Cavalry Division were already en route to Europe when the deployment was suddenly cancelled, forcing last-minute reversals and confusion. Some US Army officials were reportedly surprised that Pete Hegseth cancelled a deployment that was already underway, highlighting just how abrupt and unexpected the move was. The decision to halt the deployment was formally relayed during a US Army meeting on May 13th, catching many officers off guard as they learned the news. Army Secretary Driscoll and Army General Chernihiv did not mention this looming move in their May 12 testimony to the Senate, leaving lawmakers unaware of what was about to happen. Earlier, US military commanders had already submitted plans to carry out phased reductions, signaling that a longer-term drawdown in Europe was being prepared behind the scenes. The Pentagon has not clearly explained how these cuts fit into its broader strategy for defending Europe, the Wall Street Journal noted, deepening uncertainty among allies. Remember, Washington had previously argued that European allies should take the lead on conventional defense, with US forces shifting to a more limited supporting role. Pentagon said, and I quote, "As US forces focus on homeland defense and the Indo-Pacific, our allies and partners elsewhere will take primary responsibility for their own defense with critical but more limited support from American forces." End quote. This move is likely to resonate most strongly in Poland, the country where the US Armored Brigade had been scheduled to deploy as a frontline deterrent. Poland's defense minister said, and I quote, "This issue does not concern Poland. It relates to the previously announced change in the presence of some US armed forces in Europe. The rapidly developing capabilities of the Polish armed forces and the presence of US forces in Poland strengthen NATO's eastern flank." End quote. The US is withdrawing 5,000 troops from NATO ally Germany, the Pentagon announced on May 1st, following an order signed by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. The Pentagon said the withdrawal is expected to be completed over the next 6 to 12 months, as units are redeployed or returned to the United States. Officials noted that this drawdown would bring overall US troop levels in Europe back to roughly their pre-Ukraine war posture. The move comes after days of tensions, as a rift over the Iran war widens between Trump and key European capitals, especially Berlin. A senior Pentagon official told reporters that recent German rhetoric on the Iran conflict had been inappropriate and unhelpful for alliance cohesion. The president is rightly reacting to these counterproductive remarks, the official added, directly linking the decision to the political spat. Trump had already threatened earlier in the week to pull forces after sparring with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who said Iran was humiliating Washington over the war. One Russian Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile could destroy an entire nation, Russian military analyst Igor Korochenko said in his latest assessment. He claimed that a single Sarmat, armed with more than 10 individually guided nuclear warheads, could theoretically wipe out countries such as France or the United Kingdom. The analyst warned that the missile could be used if Russia judged that its national security or strategic stability was seriously threatened. Korochenko added that the Sarmat can strike targets via both the North and South Poles, complicating early warning and missile defense planning. His remarks were made as he spoke to Russian state media outlet Sputnik, which published his comments on the missile's capabilities. Notably, the Sarmat is designed as a heavy intercontinental ballistic missile specifically for Russia's strategic nuclear forces. Earlier this week, Russia's defense ministry released video showing a test launch of a Sarmat missile from a silo-based site. The official footage showed the initial phases of the intercontinental ballistic missile launch, from ignition to early ascent. Russian President Vladimir Putin received a formal report on the test from senior missile force commanders overseeing the launch. According to Russian reports, Putin then reviewed detailed information about the Sarmat test during a video conference with top defense officials. Putin said that Russia has greatly modernized its nuclear deterrent since the early 2000s, citing new systems introduced over the past 2 decades. He also described the Sarmat as the most powerful missile system currently in the world, highlighting its payload and range. The Russian president claimed that the missile's total warhead power exceeds comparable Western strategic systems by around 4 times.
Work on improving deterrent forces resumed in Russia and has not stopped since the early 2000s. Back then we had no time for this. To put it bluntly, Russia was going through a very difficult period in its history. But after the United States withdrew from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in 2002, we were forced to, I want to emphasize this, we were forced to think about ensuring our strategic security in the new reality and the need to maintain a strategic balance of forces, parity. That is precisely why, I would like to emphasize this once again, Russia has begun work on the development of advanced systems that have no equivalent anywhere in the world and are guaranteed to overcome both existing and future missile defense systems. We are systematically implementing the Nuclear Forces Development Program established in response to this. In 2004, we began work on the intercontinental Avangard missile system. Since 2019, it has been on combat duty. Then we developed the medium-range air-launched Kinshal hypersonic missile, which has been on duty since 2017. It is already being used during the special military operation, but work on its improvement continues, including on accuracy in non-nuclear equipment. Since 2025, the medium-range ground-based Oreshnik missile system has been on combat duty, which can also be equipped with nuclear warheads. We are finishing work on 2 systems with small nuclear propulsion systems, the unique unmanned underwater Poseidon vehicle and the unique global-range Burevestnik cruise missile. Now let's speak about Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile. We started working on it in 2011. In 2018, these works and the advantages of new prospective missile systems, including Sarmat, were publicly announced. Let me remind you what was discussed then and the advantages of our newest system. Firstly, it is the most powerful missile system in the world, not inferior in power to the Soviet-developed Voyvoda missile system in service with us. The total power of the warhead is more than 4 times the power of any most powerful existing Western counterpart. Secondly, and this is most crucial, the missile can travel not only along a ballistic, but also a suborbital trajectory, which allows it to exceed its range of over 35,000 kilometers, with simultaneously doubled accuracy characteristics and with the capability to overcome all existing and future missile defense systems. By the end of this year, Sarmat will be put on combat duty. Congratulations to the Defense Ministry, all participants, researchers, engineers, defense industrial complex production organizers, prime contractors on this major event and infallible success. Thank you for your work in strengthening Russia's defense capabilities.